What's up, guys, and welcome to the video on angles. Let's get into it. The first and most famous angle that you've probably heard of a million times is the right angle. So what is a right angle? A right angle is a 90-degree angle, and it looks exactly like an L shape. So you see here are two examples of right angles. They're both 90 degrees, and usually to denote a right angle we put this little square right in the angle, and that tells you that it is indeed 90 degrees and is indeed a right angle. Next, we're going to talk about acute angles, and acute angles are simply angles that are less than 90 degrees. And a lot of times people use the notion that it's a cute little angle, so that will give you a hint that an acute angle is something that is less than 90 degrees. The next angle to know is the opposite of the acute, which is an obtuse angle. So an obtuse angle is an angle that is bigger than 90 degrees, but of course less than 180 degrees. The next thing to know about angles is that on a straight line, the angles add up to 180 degrees. So say, for example, we have these two lines coming into this flat line at the bottom, and we have these angles that are created. We have A, B, and C. It follows that A plus B plus C has to equal 180 degrees. The next rule to be aware of is that going all the way around in a circle is 360 degrees. So going from one position and going all the way around back to your starting position is 360 degrees. The next rule to know is that vertical angles are always equal. So what are vertical angles? Let's say we have a line and another line that intersects the first line. Okay, the vertical angles are the angles that are opposite each other. So in this case, we have A and B, they're both opposite angles, therefore they are vertical angles, and that means that B must equal A. Next, let's talk about some rules revolving around parallel lines. So let's say we have these two parallel lines here, and we have what's called a transversal that's going through these lines. There are all these angles that are created. We have A, B, C, D, X, Y. So what's going on here is we've got a few things to be aware of. So first of all, corresponding angles are equal when we have two parallel lines and a transversal. So what are corresponding angles? They're kind of like the same angles that are formed with the transversal with respect to each line. So in this case, A and B, you can kind of see they look alike and they're on the same side. Those are corresponding angles, and they of course have to be equal. The next thing to be aware of is alternate interior angles are also equal. So alternate interior angles in this case are angles on opposite sides of the transversal, but both on the interior of these parallel lines. So in this case, it's B and Y. They are alternate interior angles, and they of course are equal. What does it mean to bisect an angle? To bisect an angle means to split the angle exactly in half. So let's say we have a 90-degree angle, and we have this red line that goes through that bisects this angle. That means on either side we have two equal 45-degree angles. Finally, let's talk about how to calculate the sum of angles in any polygon. So we probably know that for shapes like triangles, we have all the angles adding up to 180 degrees. And in squares, all the angles add up to 360 degrees. But how do you know what all the angles add up to in a polygon where there are 10 sides or 15 sides? So there's actually a pretty simple formula that you can memorize that will tell you exactly what the angles add up to. And the formula is n minus 2, where n is the number of sides, times 180. So let's test this out with some of our known shapes. So for example, if we have a triangle, we go ahead and plug in 3 for 3 sides, and it's 3 minus 2 times 180, which of course is 180 degrees. Let's try it with a square. So we have 4 sides minus 2, which of course gives us 2, times 180, which gives us 360. Next, let's talk about radians. So what are radians? Radians are just another way to measure angles. It's kind of like radians and degrees it's similar to Fahrenheit and Celsius. They're just two different units. So what is the relationship to degrees and between degrees and radians? We have 360 degrees equals 2 pi radians, and 180 degrees equals pi radians. So if we wanted to convert degrees to radians, all we have to do is multiply by 2 pi divided by 360. So let's say, for example, we have 90 degrees and we want to know what that is in radians. So we multiply that, 90 times 2 pi over 360. So we get 180 pi over 360, and go ahead and reduce that fraction, and that gives us pi over 2 radians. That's all for the video on angles. Let's get into some practice problems.